Hello and welcome to the final part of the Vision revival. We've got a decent amount of things on this to-do list to get done here, and hopefully by the end the bike's dialed, running, and good to go. I have to rebuild the carbs, we gotta work on the paint, do some of the servicing. All in all though, the bike already runs. It's just been apart for years, so I just gotta get it all reassembled, get it all polished, cleaned up, and ready to go. I'm still undecided on how I'm gonna address the paint. Wet sand this down to probably 2000 grit to see how well it levels back out. There's clearly been damage before and they filled it in with paint really poorly, or maybe the paint was fine and it rusted underneath. I'm not really sure what's happening underneath. If I re-clear it, I already have 2K clear for some other projects, and very likely there's gonna be leftover clear, and since that paint, once you activate it, has a very short lifespan, I may just have this ready to go in case that there's leftover, and I'll just shoot this. I did a little bit of work off camera just because it's kind of tedious and not super interesting, but I did drain out the coolant, put fresh stuff in, and bleed it as best I could without actually running the bike. The bike had orange coolant in it, and going off of color only, I would assume that would mean Dex Cool, which it definitely isn't, and I definitely am not putting Dex Cool back in it because I've seen what that can do to aluminum and plastic components. So that sure as hell is not going back in here. I did, however, put in the Xerox Asian red coolant, which is the on Toyota Scion, stuff like that. So that's all in. There's a 14 mil bleeder right here. So what I did is I had that open and the radiator cap open, filled it as much as I could until it overflowed out of the bleeder there, put all back together. There are 100% still air pockets in it, but it's gonna have to be run up the temperature to get those out. But I figured I'd mention it just for those who are worried that I might skip steps. I am not. That's completed at this point. As you may have seen in the first episode, this thing had gas in the crankcase. The oil that was in it, I only ran just to protect it while running it, to verify it actually even runs. At this point, it's also contaminated. So as far as oil goes, the manual I found said it calls for 2.5 quarts of 2040 for my climate. So that's what we're gonna go with. Got that stuff in. Top of the engine is story's pretty much the same. I'm gonna unpull the carbs and replace the intake boots and also rebuild the carbs. And hopefully nothing breaks because I need to also replace all of the rubber lines. For example, this one is, I'm sure Yamaha only, and I'm sure discontinued. So if that breaks, I'm SOL. I'm gonna have to make something work because there's no way I'm gonna find another one of those. As far as carb kit goes, this is the one I found that seemed to be the right one. It came from Japan. It took a long time to get here, but it seems to be right. So we won't find out till it's too late. Hopefully that gets the carbs sorted, and then the intake boots themselves. The old ones, they don't look too bad, but they are cracked externally, which might mean they're cracked internally as well. So I figured I would just order new ones. There we go. Okay, get out of the way. This, I don't even know what that does. The little air separator on the side needs to come off. That I guess I left loose because I know I've had this off before because I didn't know what it was. And now I realize that I never tightened it. These lines are actually pretty pliable still. They don't look molded, so those are candidate for replacement. I'm holding the camera, so sorry for shaking it. The choke comes in, goes to this linkage, which slides back and forth. So what I'm gonna probably do is just remove this bracket entirely and then separate it from the carbs. And I shouldn't be able to just get the choke cable out of this eyelet here. And then we should be good to just unbolt the carbs and get them out. I don't know how they're gonna come out of here because the frame's kind of pinched together. So I'm trying to see if they will come off now. So we'll see if they come out. It seems like I didn't, it's shaking the camera, but let's see. Yeah, okay, that's free. How are we leaking fuel? There's nothing in this. Well, anyways, I'm gonna keep fussing with this and eventually get them out of there, and I'll just let you know how I did it because this is stupid. I got the intake boots off. I'm hoping that's enough clearance to get these out the side because there's no other way to get them out as far as I can tell. Yep, there we go. Okay, so that's how you do it. There's probably an actual way to get those off, but I don't know what it is, and that worked. So that's what I'm gonna say worked. Oh, the valve cover gaskets are a little shot. Well, that's a future person problem, not mine, because I don't think I can even get those. After getting the intake boots off, the cracks that I saw, turns out they don't go all the way through, but they are still pretty massive. So I don't, oh nope, there are cracks all the way through. Just kidding. Yeah, okay, well that's why I replaced them, because they're crap. The tires are mismatched. The front one is a Bridgestone. It is a model that still exists. You can still buy them exactly as they are. So I think the front one was replaced more recently than the rear. The rear one's an old Dunlop that I haven't been able to find a date code on, but the model doesn't exist anymore. So I can only assume that this one's older, and for whatever reason they only replaced one. So what I did was I went ahead and bought a matching Bridgestone for the rear. That way we have, you know, 2 fresh-ish tires on. I'm gonna just pull this wheel off and have it done professionally. I don't feel like playing any games. Tires on, looks great. It was pretty straightforward to have that done. Only tricky thing was getting the wheel off of the final drive, so you can see it's splined there, and there's male splines on the wheel itself, and that's the only thing holding it together once the axle is out. I drained the fluid out of the final drive, which was unnecessary for removing the tire, but was also kind of just needed to be done because I hadn't done it yet. In any case, got the drum cleaned up, everything looks good, got everything greased up. So now it's just literally a matter of just putting it back together. So now the fun bit of getting the wheel seated into the final drive. There we go. That was actually really painless. If you're using this video for reference, the fill and drain plug are both 19mm. The drain plug is magnetic, which is good. And then I found the capacity to be approximately 6.5 ounces. But what I found is if you just fill up the final drive, you only get about 3 ounces in before it overflows. So what you have to do is add 3 ounces and rotate the wheel a couple times. That way it pulls the fluid into the final drive more, and just repeat that process like 3 times. And that way you get the full amount in. The camera decided to have a stroke there, so I'm not sure where we left off, but I got the top of the forward carb off, which is the carb that has the issues, and there's a bunch of varnish in it, and then the rear carb looks honestly kind of the same. So that's the front carb, and that's the rear carb, which is just marginally better. So now that I have a good look at them, I think this is as far as I'm going to go as when it comes to tearing them down, because I think the next step would then be to remove this bracket and remove the throttle linkage and then separate the two. So many more little parts that I then have to line back up when it comes time to reassemble. And this bike was running, not well, granted, but so I think I'm just gonna clean it out as best I can, replace as many parts as I can, and then just go from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start spraying the crap out of these. Probably use a couple cans of brake clean in the process, and we'll pick back up when it's time to reassemble. A couple days later, we've got everything fairly well cleaned and ready to reassemble. It turns out several of the bits from that kit are not correct. Gasket isn't precise. Like when you line up the holes, they're a little bit off. I think it'll still be okay. There's only one way to find out, really. And other than that, I found 4 or 5 ports that were clogged. I noticed this thing had 130 jets in it, which I assume are the primaries right here. The kit came with 126s. I put the 130s back in once I cleaned them out. So I'm very certain that these carbs haven't been opened in 40 years. However, that main jet, which obviously you can access without taking the carb apart, seems to be higher than original. So that's the only weird bit. I went ahead and left the 130s in because the thing did run. I'm not gonna go into tuning, I'm just trying to get the thing running better. Another thing I noticed was initially I thought the bottoms of the bowls were flat. Turns out they were just filled in with sediment and are not flat whatsoever. So if you look in there, it's like there's all sorts of little details and pockets and stuff like that. None of that was really visible previously because it was just filled in with sediment. So everything's cleaned out. Again, I would have liked to have done this where I blew it entirely apart and put everything in ultrasonic cleaner. I, 1, don't have the luxury of that time, and 2, the thing was already running, so I don't think it was necessary to blow it totally apart. What goes there? Nope, I don't know. Can you stop, please? Just going. There you go. So, get these lined up, bolted in, the little throttle, slide, whatever. Actually, I guess it's the choke. This is the choke lever. So in any case, we'll get this little T thing in there, get the fittings in, get the screws in, all in place, and then once it's assembled, we'll go ahead and put it back in. Don't know how much it matters, but I went ahead also and polished all the shiny bits with steel wool. So oil air separator, you know, headlight bezel, stuff like that. The case of the side case of the engine, these coolant tubes, stuff like that. We'll go through, get everything tightened down, get a bolt check done, make sure everything's in place and where it needs to be. Hoses are fully seated, hose clamps are fully tightened, and so on. And then we'll pick back up when it's time to do the airbox. So that definitely goes there. Where does that fitting go? Or is that just a drain? No, it's got a clamp on it, so that definitely goes somewhere. It's get this lower guy on. Air filter. I couldn't find new ones of these. You can only find NOS ones. Ours is pretty decent, so we're gonna use it. Top cover, which goes that way. Goes kind of there-ish. Don't mind me, the paint doesn't look good, but we'll buff that out later. How did that get scratched? This has been sitting in storage this whole time. That's irritating, but that's great. I'll have to deal with that later. It's leaking out of the diaphragm portion of the on-off valve, but that's fine. We're gonna put that to on. Okay, choke on, key on. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all we can do with this bike. It runs, it works as it should, but I think it's time for it to move on to a new home. I've gotten it detailed, gotten pictures of it. While I do like the bike and I'd like to keep it, I think it'd be better off to a collector or someone who knows them well enough to not be deterred by the maintenance. So far, the parts have been fairly easy to get a hold of, but either they take a long time to arrive or they're NOS and they're like deteriorated in their packages, both of which aren't really great when it comes to maintenance. I just kind of want to move on with it. So I'll ride it around, you know, get my little enjoyment out of it and then just part ways with it. I'm kind of reluctant to get rid of it because I do actually like it. I think I'd be worried constantly about damaging it since it's rare enough that if I lay it down or if someone hits me or if something catastrophic breaks, I'm the one that ruined it and took it off the road. You know, I just don't know if I want that on my mind constantly. So yeah, bittersweet ending, but on to newer things. So yeah, with everything being said, thanks for watching and stay tuned. How are you this shitty? Why are you like this? Can you stop? Stop.
You're an inanimate fucking object!
How am I out of breath? I'm out of shape. Oh no, I guess round's a shape, so we're good. Waiting for the neighbor to stop rolling out their dumpster bins. I can't, there's ants on the tire. How are there ants on here? Where are you coming from? So a couple days later, we've got everything cleaned. I'm a real boy.